The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched as far as the eye could see. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds filled the massive space. Their voices created a low hum that echoed off the crystal walls. Today was different from other days. Today they were here to judge humanity. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat alone at a small table in the center of the hall. She wore a simple blue uniform with the Earth symbol on her shoulder. Her dark hair was pulled back neatly. Her hands rested calmly on the metal surface before her. She did not look nervous. She did not look afraid. She looked tired. Around her, alien delegates whispered to each other. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others had scales that glowed in the dim light. A few looked almost human, but their eyes were too large or their skin was the wrong color. All of them stared at Sarah with the same expression. They had already decided she was guilty. Counselor Vexithara rose from the high platform where the council leaders sat. She was tall and made of living crystal. When she moved, her body caught the light and threw rainbow patterns on the walls. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "We are here today to judge the crimes of humanity," Vexithara announced. Her words were translated into hundreds of languages instantly. "The charges are serious. The evidence is clear. Humanity has broken the most sacred laws of our galaxy." Sarah listened without moving. She had heard these accusations many times in the past months. The council claimed that human scientists had been doing illegal experiments on primitive alien species. They said humans had been changing the genes of these beings without permission. They called it a crime against all life in the galaxy. The first piece of evidence appeared on the great screens around the hall. It showed what looked like a human laboratory. Scientists in white coats worked with strange equipment. Alien creatures lay on metal tables. The creatures looked sick and scared. This footage was taken on the planet Zerion 7, Vexithara continued. Human researchers were found conducting genetic experiments on the native population. They were trying to change these beings into something else, something that would serve human purposes. Murmurs of anger rippled through the crowd. Sarah knew the footage was fake. She had been to Zerion 7 many times. The human scientists there were trying to help the native species fight a disease that was killing their children. They were not conducting experiments. They were saving lives. More evidence followed. Documents that showed human plans to modify alien species. Audio recordings of human scientists talking about genetic manipulation and biological enhancement. Witness statements from aliens who claimed they had been victims of human experiments. Sarah recognized none of it as real. The documents used the wrong scientific terms. The audio had been edited badly. The witnesses described procedures that no human scientist had ever performed. But the council did not want to hear the truth. They wanted to believe humanity was evil. One by one, alien delegates stood to speak against humanity. The Zephyrians were tall, thin beings with silver skin. Their representative spoke in a voice like singing metal. "Humanity cannot be trusted," the Zephyrians said. "They came to our world speaking of friendship and cooperation. But they were really studying us, learning our weaknesses, planning to change us into something that would serve their empire." The hegemony delegate was next. The hegemony ruled 12 star systems with an iron fist. Their representative was a massive creature covered in armor-like skin. "We have always known humans were dangerous," the creature rumbled. "They reproduce too quickly. They adapt too easily. They ask too many questions. Now we see what they really want. They want to remake the galaxy in their own image." More aliens spoke. Each one told stories of human crimes that had never happened. Each one demanded punishment for wrongs that had never been committed. Sarah listened to it all with the same calm expression. When the accusers were finished, Vexithara turned to Sarah. "Ambassador Chen, you have heard the charges against your species. You have seen the evidence. How do you answer?" Sarah stood slowly. The hall fell silent. Thousands of alien eyes watched her. She looked up at the council leaders. She looked out at the crowd of delegates. Then she spoke in a clear, steady voice. "We deny these accusations," she said. "Our record speaks for itself. For 300 years, humanity has worked alongside the species of this galaxy. We have shared our knowledge freely. We have helped where we could. We have harmed no one." She paused for a moment. "The evidence you have shown is false. The witnesses are lying. The documents are fake. But I will not waste time arguing with minds that are already closed. History will judge who was right and who was wrong." Sarah sat back down. She did not say another word. Vexithara called for the vote. All in favor of expelling humanity from the Galactic Council? Hands, tentacles, claws, and appendages rose throughout the hall. The vote was unanimous. Every single delegate voted to kick humanity out of the galactic community. Humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council, Vexthara announced. All human ships must leave Council space within 30 days. All human colonies in Council territory must be abandoned. Humanity is forbidden from entering any system under Council protection. The crowd erupted in cheers. Beings that had never agreed on anything else celebrated together. They had found a common enemy. They had driven out the threat to their established order. Sarah gathered her papers and put them in a simple briefcase. She stood and bowed once to the council leaders. She did not bow deeply. It was the polite bow one gave to strangers, not the respectful bow one gave to friends. She walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet hall. No one spoke as she passed. No one tried to stop her. No one said goodbye. At the door, Sarah turned back for one last look at the assembly. Her eyes found Counselor Zarathek of the Hegemony. Zarathek was younger than the other council leaders. She had the look of someone who was not completely comfortable with what had just happened. Sarah nodded to her once. Then she walked through the door and disappeared from sight. Behind her, the council began making plans for a galaxy without humanity. They talked about new trade routes and new alliances. They discussed how to divide up the resources that humans would leave behind. They celebrated the beginning of a new age. None of them noticed the small doubt that had appeared in Zarathek's eyes. None of them wondered what they might have lost. None of them asked if they had made a terrible mistake. In her small ship orbiting the council station, Sarah sent a single message back to Earth. It contained only 3 words. The vote passed. Within hours, every human in council space received new orders. Pack up, leave quietly. Do not argue. Do not fight. Simply go. Humanity had been found guilty of crimes they did not commit. They had been sentenced by judges who did not care about truth. They had been exiled from a community they had helped build, but they would not beg. They would not plead. They would not even explain themselves. They would simply leave with the same dignity they had always shown, and the galaxy would learn, perhaps too late, what it meant to lose the quiet competence that had held so much together. The news spread through human space faster than light itself. Every colony, every outpost, every ship received the same message. The Galactic Council had voted. Humanity was expelled. All humans must leave Council space within 30 days. Captain Marcus Rodriguez read the order on the bridge of his cargo ship, the New Horizon. His crew gathered around him, their faces showing confusion and anger. The ship was currently orbiting Kepler 7th, a world inhabited by reptilian beings called Keplerians. For 3 months, Rodriguez and his crew had been helping fight a plague that was killing millions. "Captain, this can't be right," said Dr. Sarah Kim, the ship's medical officer. "We've saved over 2 million Keplerian lives. Their government invited us here. How can the council call us criminals?" Rodriguez folded the message carefully. "It doesn't matter what we've done here. Orders are orders. Start packing the medical equipment. We leave in 2 days." Down on the planet's surface, Dr. Seth rushed through the corridors of the main hospital. The Keplerian physician had worked alongside the humans every day since they arrived. His golden eyes were wide with panic as he found Rodriguez in the children's ward. "Captain, please tell me the rumors are not true," Seth said, his forked tongue flicking nervously. "You cannot be leaving, not now. The plague is finally under control, but we still need your help." Rodriguez was holding a small Keplerian child who had just recovered from the disease. The child's scales were still pale, but she was alive. Without human medicine, she would have died weeks ago. "I'm sorry, Doc," Rodriguez said quietly. "The council has spoken. We have to go, but this is madness." Seth's tail lashed with frustration. "You have committed no crimes here. You have been heroes. The council members who voted against you have never even visited our world. They do not know what you have done for us." Rodriguez gently handed the child back to Seth. "Take care of her. Take care of all of them. You have the knowledge now. You can continue the treatments without us." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On the mining world of Rigel Prime, human engineers who had solved critical safety problems packed their tools. On the research station at Vega 6, human scientists who had been working on a cure for a genetic disease affecting 3 different species closed down their laboratories. The withdrawal was eerily quiet. There were no angry protests, no demands for justice, no threats of retaliation. Humans simply did what they had always done. They followed orders professionally and efficiently. Commander Lisa Park commanded the human diplomatic mission on Centauri Station. For 15 years, she had helped mediate disputes between dozens of different species. Her office walls were covered with grateful letters from alien governments thanking her for preventing wars and negotiating peace treaties. As she packed these letters into storage boxes, her assistant, a young officer named Tom Chen, watched in disbelief. "Commander, surely some of the species we've helped will speak up for us," Tom said. "The Andromedans, the Tau Cetians, the Vegan Collective. We've prevented conflicts that could have killed billions." Park sealed another box. "The vote was unanimous, Tom. Even the species we helped voted against us. They were afraid to stand alone against the majority." She picked up a small crystal sculpture from her desk. It was a gift from the children of Proxima B after human doctors had saved them from a genetic disorder. The sculpture showed human and alien children playing together under two suns. "Sometimes doing the right thing isn't enough," Park said softly. "Sometimes politics matters more than truth." The aliens watched in growing confusion as humans departed. Many had expected anger, protests, maybe even violence. Instead, they saw something that troubled them more. They saw dignity. On Tau Ceti III, the local government held an emergency session as human relief workers prepared to leave. The planet had been devastated by earthquakes 6 months earlier. Human teams had rebuilt entire cities and restored the power grid. "This is impossible," declared Prime Minister Veltar, her blue tentacles waving in agitation. "The humans are our partners. They have asked for nothing in return for their help. Why would the Council accuse them of crimes?" Her advisor, an older Tau Cetian named Morton, checked his datapad nervously. "The vote was unanimous, Prime Minister. Every council member agreed that humanity posed a threat to galactic peace." "But that makes no sense," Veltar protested. "The humans prevented 3 wars in our sector alone last year. They shared their earthquake prediction technology with us for free. They are the most peaceful species in the galaxy." Mordan had no answer. None of them did. The pattern repeated everywhere. Alien governments that had benefited from human assistance found themselves confused and ashamed. They knew the accusations were false, but they had voted anyway. Fear and politics had overcome truth and gratitude. On the industrial world of Wolf 359, factory manager Kexthan watched human engineers pack up the equipment they had installed to reduce pollution. The technology had cleaned the planet's atmosphere and saved millions of lives. "This is wrong," Kexthan told his workers. "The humans gave us this technology for free. They trained our people to use it. They asked for nothing except the chance to help. How can the council call them criminals?" But even as he spoke, Kexthan remembered how his own government had voted. They had been afraid to stand against the council majority. They had chosen safety over justice. The human departure was so organized and professional that many aliens began to feel a strange emotion they had not expected. Shame. On the final day before the deadline, Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of his ship as it prepared to leave Kepler 7 orbit. Below, the planet's cities sparkled with new life. The plague was defeated. Children who would have died were playing in the streets. Hospitals that had been full of suffering were now full of hope. Dr. Seth's voice came through the communication system. "Captain Rodriguez, the entire Keplerian government wishes to thank you one final time. You have saved our world. We will never forget what humanity has done for us." Rodriguez activated the microphone. "Take care of yourselves, friends. Keep learning. Keep growing. Make us proud." The connection ended. The ship turned away from Kepler 7, then joined the growing convoy of human vessels heading for the edge of Council space. Across the galaxy, the exodus continued. Thousands of ships, millions of humans, all leaving quietly, professionally, with their heads held high. They took with them centuries of accumulated knowledge. Medical techniques that had saved billions of lives. Engineering solutions that had prevented disasters. Diplomatic skills that had maintained peace between hostile species. But they also took something less tangible and more valuable. They took the example of how to behave with dignity in the face of injustice. The aliens who watched them go began to realize they had witnessed something rare and precious. They had seen an entire species refuse to lower themselves to the level of their accusers. In the weeks that followed, As the last human ships disappeared beyond the galactic rim, some aliens began to ask uncomfortable questions. What if the accusations had been false? What if they had made a terrible mistake? But it was too late for questions. Humanity was gone, and slowly, very slowly, the galaxy began to understand what it had lost. 6 months after humanity's departure, the first cracks began to show. They were small at first. Trade routes that used to run smoothly now had delays. Equipment that had worked perfectly for decades suddenly started breaking down. Research projects that had been making steady progress ground to a halt. Dr. Yehara Voss stared at her computer screen in frustration. The Centaurian scientist was one of the galaxy's leading experts on infectious diseases. For the past 3 weeks, she had been studying a new pathogen that was spreading through the outer rim territories. The disease attacked multiple species at once, something that should have been impossible. The genetic structure makes no sense, she muttered to her research team. This pathogen is adapting faster than anything I've ever seen. It's like it's specifically designed to overcome natural immune systems. Her assistant, a young Centaurian named Jexval, looked up from his own workstation. Doctor, I've been going through the old databases. There are some references to similar pathogens in the human medical archives. They had developed protocols for this exact type of disease. Voss felt a chill run through her silver-blue skin. The human archives are sealed. The council made it illegal to access them after the expulsion. But doctor, people are dying. The infection rate has doubled in the past week. If the humans knew how to fight this disease, the law is the law, Voss said firmly. But even as she spoke, she wondered how many lives could be saved if they could just look at the human research. She pushed the thought away. The humans were criminals. The council had said so. On the other side of the galaxy, Counselor Zarathek was having her own doubts. As head of the ethics committee, she had access to sealed files and classified information. What she was finding in those files made her stomach turn. She sat in her private office, surrounded by documents that painted a very different picture of humanity than the one presented at the trial. Medical records showing human doctors working around the clock to save alien children. Engineering reports detailing how human technology had prevented environmental disasters. Diplomatic logs recording human mediators preventing wars between hostile species. The more she read, the more obvious it became that the evidence against humanity had been fabricated. The timestamps on the surveillance footage were wrong. The genetic signatures in the research documents didn't match any known human work. Several of the victim species had actually invited human assistance and were grateful for it. Zarathek picked up a report from Rigel Prime. According to the trial evidence, humans had conducted illegal genetic experiments on Rigelian minors, but the actual record showed something completely different. The humans had been helping Rigelian children who suffered from a genetic disorder that made their bones brittle. Human gene therapy had cured hundreds of children who would otherwise have lived in constant pain. They were helping, she whispered to herself. They were helping everyone, and we called them monsters. She opened another file. This one detailed human work on Zerion 7, the same planet where the Council claimed humans had conducted illegal experiments. The real records showed human doctors fighting a plague that was killing the native population. They had worked for months without pay, sharing their medical knowledge freely. The fake footage shown at the trial had been created by taking real medical procedures and editing them to look sinister. The experiments were actually life-saving treatments. The victims were patients who had been healed. Zarathek felt sick. She had voted to expel humanity based on lies. They all had. Meanwhile, the mysterious pathogen continued to spread. It had now reached 12 star systems and showed no signs of slowing down. The death toll was climbing into the millions. Emergency sessions were called. The galaxy's best medical minds worked desperately to find a cure. But without access to human research, they were fighting blind. Dr. Voss attended one such emergency meeting on Centauri Prime. Representatives from dozens of species had gathered to share information and coordinate their response. The atmosphere was tense and fearful. The pathogen is unlike anything in our databases, reported Dr. Kethmore of the Andromedan Medical Institute. It's almost as if it was designed to exploit weaknesses in multiple immune systems simultaneously. Our analysis suggests artificial enhancement, added Professor Yilthara from Vega 6. Someone or something has modified this disease to make it more deadly. A thought occurred to Dr. Voss. She raised her hand hesitantly. What if What if this isn't artificial enhancement? What if this is a natural pathogen that we simply don't understand? The humans encountered diseases like this in their early space exploration. Their archives might contain information about how to fight it. The room fell silent. The suggestion was logical, but it was also illegal. Finally, Counselor Nexthon of the Zephyrian Alliance spoke. The human archives are sealed for good reason. We cannot trust research conducted by criminals. But if people are dying, Voss began. The humans were expelled for conducting illegal genetic experiments, Nexthon interrupted. We cannot use research that was obtained through immoral means. The meeting continued, but no progress was made. The pathogen kept spreading and the death toll kept rising. On the industrial world of Wolf 359, another crisis was developing. The pollution control systems that humans had installed were beginning to fail. Without human technicians to maintain them, the alien workers struggled to keep the equipment running. Factory manager Kexithan watched in horror as toxic chemicals began leaking into the atmosphere. The systems that had cleaned his world's air for 5 years were breaking down, and none of his people knew how to fix them. Contact the human technical support, he ordered his communications officer. Sir, there is no human technical support anymore, the officer replied. All human personnel were evacuated 6 months ago. Kexthan stared at the pollution readings climbing on his screens. His world had 3 billion inhabitants. If the air filtration systems failed completely, millions would die from toxic exposure. Try to contact them anyway, he said desperately. Maybe they left behind some instructions or maintenance protocols. But there was no response. The humans were gone and they had taken their knowledge with them. Similar problems were emerging throughout Council space. Computer systems that humans had designed began experiencing errors that no one else knew how to fix. Transportation networks that depended on human logistics started breaking down. Research facilities that had relied on human expertise found their projects stalling. It was as if the galaxy had developed a dependency on human competence without realizing it. For centuries, humans had quietly solved problems, prevented disasters, and maintained systems that kept galactic civilization running smoothly. Now they were gone, and the cracks in the foundation were beginning to show. Counselor Zarathek continued her investigation into the evidence against humanity. The deeper she dug, the more convinced she became that the entire trial had been a sham. But she also discovered something else that chilled her to the bone. The conspiracy against humanity had been organized by a small group of council members who feared human influence in galactic affairs. They had seen humanity's growing reputation for competence and helpfulness as a threat to the established order. Rather than compete with human excellence, they had chosen to destroy it through lies and fabrication. The worst part was that many species had voted against humanity, not because they believed the accusations, but because they were afraid to stand alone against the council majority. Fear in politics had triumphed over truth and justice. As Zarathek compiled her evidence, she received an urgent message from the Outer Rim territories. The pathogen that had started as a minor outbreak was now a full-scale pandemic. 50 million beings were dead, and the disease showed no signs of slowing down. The galaxy's medical experts were helpless. They needed the human research archives, but pride and legal restrictions prevented them from asking for help from the species they had branded as criminals. Zarathek made a decision that would change everything. She began preparing a report that would expose the truth about humanity's expulsion. But she wondered if it would be too late. The humans were gone, possibly forever, and the galaxy was paying the price for its prejudice and fear. Outside her office window, she could see ships arriving with refugees from the infected worlds. The pandemic was spreading faster than anyone had predicted. Soon it might reach the core worlds of the galaxy. If that happened, the death toll would be in the billions. And it would all be because the galaxy had chosen to silence the one species that might have been able to help. 1 year after humanity's departure, the galactic community was falling apart. The pandemic that had started in the Outer Rim territories had spread to over 50 star systems. The death toll had reached 100 million beings. Entire worlds were under quarantine, their populations dying while the galaxy's best medical minds struggled helplessly to find a cure. Counselor Vexithara stood before another emergency session of the Galactic Council. Her crystalline form, once bright and confident, now appeared dim and fractured. The stress of constant crisis meetings had affected even her mineral-based physiology. "The situation continues to deteriorate," she announced to the assembled delegates. Her voice, usually clear as wind chimes, now carried a harsh, grinding quality. "The Gamma Sector outbreak has claimed 50 million lives. The Delta Sector is reporting system-wide quarantine failures. Our medical teams are requesting emergency access to all available research databases." She paused, and everyone in the chamber knew what she was going to say next. "This includes the sealed human archives." The reaction was immediate. Delegates began shouting over each other in dozens of languages. The universal translator struggled to keep up with the chaos. "Absolutely not," bellowed Councillor Nexthan of the Zephyrian Alliance. "We will not contaminate our research with data obtained through criminal means." "My people are dying," interrupted Ambassador Jethkar of the Rigelian Collective. His feathered crest was fully extended in agitation. Whatever the humans did or didn't do, their medical knowledge could save millions of lives. "The law is clear," insisted Councillor Morthek of the Hegemony. "Access to human research is forbidden. We cannot make exceptions even in crisis," but Jethkar was not backing down. "My own daughter was treated by human doctors before the expulsion. She had a genetic condition that our physicians said was incurable. The humans fixed it in 3 days. 3 days. If that was a crime, then I am grateful for criminals." More delegates began speaking up. The Keplerian representative described how humans had saved their world from a plague. The Tau Cetian ambassador talked about human engineers who had rebuilt their cities after earthquakes. The Vegan delegate mentioned human diplomats who had prevented a war between neighboring systems. For the first time since the expulsion, the Council was hearing the truth about humanity's activities. But it was too late. The humans were gone, and the galaxy was paying the price. Dr. Yara Voss sat in her laboratory on Centauri Prime, staring at genetic sequences that made no sense. The pathogen had mutated again, becoming even more deadly and infectious. Her team had been working for 18 hours straight, but they were no closer to a solution. "Doctor," said her assistant Jexval, "I've been monitoring communications from the Outer Rim. The infection has reached the Proxima system. They're reporting a 90% mortality rate among children." Voss closed her eyes. Proxima B was home to 50 million children of various species. If the disease reached them with a 90% mortality rate, 45 million young beings would die. "There has to be something we're missing," she said desperately. "Some pattern, some weakness in the pathogen that we haven't seen." Jexval hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Doctor, I've been thinking about what you said before, about the human archives. What if we could access them unofficially, just to look for clues about how to fight this disease?" "That would be illegal," Voss replied automatically. But even as she said it, she was thinking about those 45 million children. The penalties for accessing sealed human data are severe. We could lose our research licenses, our citizenship, everything. But if we could save even some of those children— Voss stared at her computer screen. The genetic sequence of the pathogen mocked her with its complexity. Everything she and her team had tried had failed. The disease was smarter than they were, more adaptable, more deadly. She made a decision that would change her life forever. Access the human medical archives. All of them. Use my personal authorization codes. Jexval's eyes widened. "Doctor, if they catch us, then we'll face the consequences together. But I won't let those children die because of political pride." As Jexval began accessing the forbidden archives, Voss thought about how different things might have been if humanity had never been expelled. Human doctors would be working alongside alien physicians right now. Human research would be freely available. Human expertise would be saving lives instead of being locked away behind legal barriers. Meanwhile, on the industrial world of Wolf 359, the environmental crisis was reaching critical levels. The pollution control systems installed by humans were failing faster than alien technicians could repair them. The planet's atmosphere was becoming toxic, and 3 billion inhabitants were at risk. Factory manager Kexton stood in the main control room, watching helplessly as contamination levels climbed toward lethal concentrations. His best engineers had been working around the clock for months, but they simply didn't understand the human technology well enough to maintain it properly. "Sir," reported his chief engineer, "we've lost filtration systems 7 through 12. Atmospheric toxicity in the southern continent is approaching dangerous levels. We're looking at mass evacuations within the week." Kexton slammed his fist against the control panel. "This is insane. The humans left us detailed manuals, training programs, everything we should need to maintain these systems. Why can't we make them work? His engineer looked exhausted. The systems are more complex than we realized, sir. The humans integrated them with the planet's entire ecosystem. Every component affects every other component. Without their expertise, we're just guessing. Outside the facility, Kexthan could see the first signs of atmospheric poisoning. The sky had taken on a sickly yellow color, and plants were beginning to wither. Soon his people would start getting sick, then they would start dying. He thought about the human engineers who had installed these systems. They had worked for 2 years, asking for nothing in return except the chance to help. They had trained local workers, left detailed instructions, and even established a maintenance schedule that should have kept everything running for decades. But the instructions assumed a level of technical understanding that his people simply didn't possess. The humans had made it look easy because they were experts. Without them, the complex systems were failing one by one. The same pattern was playing out across the galaxy. Computer networks designed by humans were crashing. Transportation systems were breaking down. Research projects were stalling without human collaboration. It was becoming clear that humanity's contribution to galactic civilization had been far greater than anyone had realized. They hadn't just been participants in the galactic community. They had been essential to its functioning. On the diplomatic front, conflicts that had been dormant for decades were flaring into open warfare. Human mediators had quietly prevented or resolved thousands of disputes over the centuries. Without their calming influence, old rivalries were resurging. The border war between the Zephyrian Alliance and the Andromedan Federation escalated from minor skirmishes to full-scale battles. Trade disputes between dozens of species turned into economic warfare. 3 separate conflicts threatened to destabilize entire sectors of the galaxy. Counselor Zarathek watched the reports of mounting crises with growing horror. Her investigation into humanity's expulsion was nearly complete, and the evidence was damning. Not damning to humanity, but to the council that had expelled them. The accusations against humanity had been completely fabricated. Every piece of evidence had been forged or taken out of context. The conspiracy had been planned by a small group of council members who feared human influence and competence. But the worst part was the cost of their deception. Hundreds of millions of beings were dead or dying because the galaxy had expelled the one species that could have helped them. Systems were failing, conflicts were erupting, and civilization itself was beginning to collapse. Zarathek prepared her final report, knowing that it would destroy careers and possibly governments. But she also knew that the truth had to come out. The galaxy needed to understand what it had lost when it chose prejudice over justice. As she worked, emergency alarms began sounding throughout the council station. The pandemic had reached the core worlds. The disease that had started in the outer rim was now threatening the most populated systems in the galaxy. Soon, the death toll would be in the billions. And it all could have been prevented if the galaxy had chosen to trust the species that had spent centuries earning that trust through quiet service and competence. The humans were gone, possibly forever. And the galaxy was learning, too late, what it meant to lose the steady hands that had held so much together. 2 years after humanity's expulsion, Counselor Zarathek stood before the largest gathering in the history of the Galactic Council. Representatives from every member species filled the Great Hall. Emergency delegates from worlds that had never participated in council business sat alongside veteran diplomats. The crisis had become so severe that even the most isolated civilizations had been forced to take notice. The pandemic now covered half the galaxy. The death toll had passed 500 million and showed no signs of slowing. Entire star systems had gone dark, their populations either dead or fled. The galactic economy had collapsed. Wars raged across dozens of sectors. The civilization that had taken millions of years to build was crumbling in a matter of months. Zarathek held a data pad containing 2 years of investigation. The evidence she had compiled would shock the galaxy, but she wondered if anyone would listen. Pride and fear had driven them to this point. Would truth be enough to save them now? Members of the council, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. 2 years ago, we voted unanimously to expel humanity from our community. We did so based on evidence that humanity had committed crimes against galactic law. Today, I stand before you to reveal the truth about that evidence. She activated the main display screens. Documents appeared that most of the delegates had never seen. Medical records, engineering reports, diplomatic logs, all showing humanity in a very different light than the trial evidence had suggested. The charges against humanity were false, Zarathek declared. Every single piece of evidence was fabricated or taken out of context. The humans were not conducting illegal experiments. They were saving lives, preventing disasters, and maintaining peace throughout our galaxy. Murmurs of shock rippled through the assembly. Some delegates looked genuinely surprised. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, suggesting they had suspected the truth all along. Zarathek continued, her voice growing stronger. The surveillance footage from Zirion 7 was edited to make medical procedures look like torture. The genetic research documents were altered to hide the fact that humans were curing diseases, not causing them. The witness testimony was provided by beings who had never even encountered humans. She brought up specific examples. On Rigel Prime, humans were accused of genetic experimentation on mining workers. The truth is that they were treating children born with a genetic disorder that made their bones fragile. Human gene therapy cured hundreds of children who would otherwise have lived in constant pain. The Regelian delegate, Ambassador Jethkar, stood up slowly. His feathers were drooping with shame. "This is true," he said quietly. "My own daughter was one of those children. The human doctors asked for nothing in return. They simply wanted to help." More delegates began speaking up. The Keplerian representative described how humans had fought a plague that killed millions, working for months without pay. The Tau Sadian ambassador talked about human engineers who rebuilt cities after earthquakes, sharing their technology freely. One by one, species that had voted to expel humanity began confessing the truth about their experiences. The humans had been partners, helpers, friends. They had asked for nothing except the chance to contribute to galactic civilization. Counselor Vexithera, her crystalline form now visibly cracked from stress, spoke in a voice like breaking glass. "If this is true, then why did we vote to expel them? Why did no one speak up during the trial?" Zarathek had been preparing for this question. Because the conspiracy was carefully planned. A small group of council members feared humanity's growing influence and competence. Rather than compete with human excellence, they chose to destroy it through lies and fabrication. She named the conspirators, several powerful council members who had orchestrated the false evidence. Their goal had been to eliminate what they saw as a threat to the established order. But the real tragedy, Zarathek continued, is that many of us voted against humanity, not because we believed the accusations, but because we were afraid to stand alone against the majority. We chose political safety over truth and justice. The chamber fell silent as the full weight of their mistake became clear. They had expelled their greatest allies based on lies. They had silenced the voices that might have saved them from the current crisis. Dr. Yara Voss was watching the broadcast from her laboratory on Centauri Prime. Around her, computers displayed the results of her illegal research into the human medical archives. What she had found there had both amazed and horrified her. The humans had encountered the current pandemic pathogen centuries ago, during their early space exploration. They had developed not just treatments, but complete protocols for containing and eliminating such diseases. The information that could have saved hundreds of millions of lives had been sitting in their archives all along, sealed away by legal restrictions and political pride. Her research had led to breakthrough treatments that were already saving lives in the Outer Rim territories, but it was too late for most of the victims. The pandemic could have been stopped in its early stages if the galaxy had simply asked for human help, instead of forbidding human research. Back in the council chamber, Zarathek was presenting the most damning evidence yet. Economic analysis showing how galactic civilization had become dependent on human competence without realizing it. Infrastructure maintained by human engineers. Conflicts prevented by human diplomats. Research advanced by human scientists. For 3 centuries, humanity provided services that held our civilization together, she explained. They did it so quietly and efficiently that we never noticed how much we relied on them. Only now, in their absence, do we see the full scope of what we have lost. The statistics were staggering. Diplomatic solutions to conflicts had decreased by 70% without human mediators. Industrial accidents had increased by 400% without human safety experts. Medical research had slowed to a crawl without human collaboration. We did not expel criminals from our midst, Zarathek declared, her voice rising with emotion. We exiled our greatest allies. We silenced our most competent partners. We drove away the very people who might have saved us from our current crisis. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted accusations at each other. The conspirators who had orchestrated humanity's expulsion tried to defend their actions. Representatives from dying worlds demanded immediate action to contact humanity and ask for help. Through the noise, Counselor Vexithera's voice cut like a shard of broken crystal. Order, order! We must vote on a resolution immediately. When the chamber finally quieted, she continued, I move that we formally apologize to humanity for the injustice we have committed. I further move that we invite them to return to the council with full honors and expanded privileges. All in favor? The vote was as unanimous as the original expulsion had been. Every delegate raised their hand, tentacle or appendage in support. Even the conspirators voted yes, knowing that their careers were already over. But when they tried to send the message of apology and invitation, they discovered something that chilled them to their cores. Humanity was beyond the range of conventional communications. Long-range sensors detected massive human fleets in unexplored regions of space, far beyond the galactic rim. The humans hadn't just left council space. They had left the galaxy entirely. Follow-up expeditions found only empty space where the human fleets had passed. They had traveled beyond the known galaxy, beyond the reach of the civilization that had rejected them. The final irony was not lost on anyone. In their arrogance, the Council had expelled the one species that might have helped them develop the technology needed to follow where humanity had gone. The humans had been the galaxy's greatest innovators, their research pushing the boundaries of science and engineering. Without them, the galaxy was trapped in its own limitations, unable to reach beyond the borders of known space. The memorial they built to humanity was placed in the center of the Council chamber. It was not a celebration of their return, but a warning about the price of prejudice and the value of quiet competence. The inscription read, "To humanity, who served without recognition, gave without expectation, and departed without anger. Their absence teaches us what their presence was worth." Emergency measures were implemented to share the human research that Dr. Voss had illegally accessed. The pandemic was eventually contained, but not before killing over 1 billion beings. Industrial systems were redesigned using human principles, but decades of progress were lost. Diplomatic protocols based on human methods were established, but countless conflicts had already escalated beyond peaceful resolution. The galaxy slowly began to rebuild, but it was forever changed. They had learned that true strength came not from power or politics, but from quiet competence and service to others. They had discovered that the most valuable citizens were often the ones who worked behind the scenes, solving problems and preventing crises without seeking recognition. Most importantly, they had learned that prejudice and fear could destroy even the greatest civilizations. The vote to expel humanity had been unanimous, but it had also been wrong. Unanimity meant nothing without truth and justice. Somewhere beyond the galactic rim, humanity was building something new.